that the 12-day war had completely destroyed Iran's nuclear.
Donald Trump did.
Maybe he did. I didn't see that.
He said it had been set back decades. He's the president of the United States. He was the one who basically ordered the strike. So the very most powerful and important person imaginable was the one who publicly declared, we have set back Iran's nuclear capability.
They called it a surgical strike, a clean war, a necessary action to stop Iran's nuclear threat. But was any of it true? Last summer, we were told the 12-day war had set Iran's nuclear program back decades. President Trump himself declared victory. The mission was accomplished. 8 months later, the USA was back at war. A full-scale bombing campaign. Hundreds dead. And the same justification. Iran's nuclear program is an imminent threat. Something doesn't add up. In this debate, one speaker calls the war what it really is, a major international crime. A violation of the UN Charter. An act of aggression against a country that posed no immediate threat to the USA. He argues that Iran's nuclear program is a smokescreen. The real goal? Regime change. The same goal the USA and Israel have had since 1979. And the evidence? Tulsi Gabbard, Trump's own director of national intelligence, testified to Congress that Iran has no nuclear weapons program. So why is the USA at war? Watch to the end and decide who's telling the truth.
There's a kind of asymmetric war going on involving the Strait of Hormuz, and we've discussed that earlier. There's also an asymmetric war going on in terms of the aspirations and interests of America and Israel, it seems to me, where all the mood music coming out of Netanyahu, and we saw a bit of it with Naftali Bennett earlier, is that they believe this is nowhere near finished, this mission, that there cannot be any kind of victory until Iran's nuclear capability is destroyed and the enriched uranium has been removed. Now, I don't see that they're anywhere near doing either of those things, and nor is there any incentive right now for Iran to surrender those things voluntarily. So where are we? Because the pressure, as Paul Rykov rightly observed just then, is piling on Donald Trump. I'm sure from the softening of his own rhetoric in the last few days, he's desperate to get out of this thing, but he doesn't quite know how to. And he's got the Israelis saying, we cannot just walk away. This job is only half finished.
Yeah, I agree. And look, the whole enriched uranium nuclear program is a smokescreen. The reality of it is Israel has wanted the regime change in Iran since '79. So has parts of the US government as well. And they're using the nuclear program as a way of trying to basically distract from the real purpose. And that's why, they went in last year and there was a 12-day war, and that was called a success by the Israelis and the Americans. And we're back to where we were. And the other massive point is, look, we're talking about the strategy and who might win and who might lose. This was a major international war crime. This was a violation of Article 2 of the UN Charter. You can't just attack a country which is not a threat to you, and it's not a threat to them. And they should be indicted for it. We've already got the Prime Minister of Israel already has an arrest warrant out from the ICC. Another one should go out to Donald Trump. And I actually think it's a bit disgusting to talk about the war in these terms of how can we open the Strait of Hormuz, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about a major international crime where the Americans and the Israelis killed nearly 200 schoolgirls as one of the first acts of the war. And they claim that it was a mistake, but it might not have even been a mistake. We've seen how the Israelis act. We've seen how the Americans act, and we've seen what they've done in Gaza, what they've done in Lebanon. They target civilians, they target kids. They want to send the impression that they will tolerate no resistance. So we're dealing with outlaw rogue states that need to be held in check, and the legal institutions can't do it. The ICC and West France have done nothing. In fact, European partners of Israel have not enforced it at all, even members of the ICC. So where do we go from there? We live in the law of the jungle now. And I think that the reason that this will carry on, the reason there's this breach is because they don't even know what to do now, because they obviously believed going in hard, as you said, that Netanyahu gave this PowerPoint presentation to Trump and said, look, the IRGC will collapse if we kill the Ayatollah. It didn't happen. So where do they go now? The uprising, which they've been trying to foment, by the way, for years. And there was a good article in the Israeli press which came out in recent days about how Mossad has been fomenting unrest in Iran and was even involved in the December protests. It's not working. And as you said, this criminal attack has actually had the opposite impact. It's got people behind the government in Iran, people who previously weren't, because they see that they're being attacked by hostile, violent powers that want to take control of their country. Because why is Iran a threat? Iran's a threat because it's not under the control of the United States and Israel. The Gulf dictatorships, many of them are worse than the political situation in Iran. Look at Saudi Arabia. You get put to death for a tweet there. Who's the biggest supporters of Saudi Arabia? UK and US. So the whole human rights stuff is rubbish. The uranium is nuclear program is rubbish. And look, Piers, I'll end with this. You led the charge against the war in Iraq, which was based around, well, supposedly based around WMDs. That was completely false. So the nuclear deal is the same. It's part of the same dynamic. And look, Tulsi Gabbard, who is the Director of National Intelligence for Trump, she made testimony in Congress in March 2025, where she said the intelligence community has come to the conclusion that Iran has no nuclear weapons program. That's Tulsi Gabbard saying that, and then Trump obviously rubbished it a couple of months later. But we live swimming in propaganda, and so much of this war is propaganda. The real reason they are bombing Iran is they want to get rid of a government that does not do what they're told.
Purpose that we were told had been incredibly successful. Part of the failure of trust now is that we were told after that 12-day war their nuclear capabilities being destroyed. And yet here we were back within just 8-9 months launching a full war against Iran to get rid of their nuclear capability, which they were about to imminently deploy. And this reminded me of what happened with the Iraq war in 2003, which, as editor of a Daily Mirror newspaper in the UK, I very loudly opposed, even though I had my own brother fighting in it when it started. But the reason was I wasn't convinced by the evidence that said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and was about to use them and could hit London in 45 minutes, none of which turned out to be true. So those with long memories, are very cynical about this. What would you say to try and reassure people who are cynical that Iran did have the nuclear capability, was about to use it? And how do you explain, if that is the case, that what happened last summer clearly wasn't a success after all?
Well, I don't suggest that Iran was about to use a nuclear weapon. I don't think Iran had a nuclear weapon, but it was clearly, and I think, even there are plenty of conspiracy theorists around who say that there is no such thing as an Iranian nuclear program. Well, I think the International Atomic Energy Agency would disagree with that and has disagreed with that in its reports. To my mind, all the studying I've done, I have no doubt that Iran was working on a nuclear program. And it's not just me who thinks that, it's not just the West who thinks that, but it's many countries in the Middle East who saw that program in progress and were themselves taking steps to arm themselves against it. For example, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the UAE, all of them have been looking at the potential for their own nuclear weapons program in light of what Iran's got. And those people who say, oh, yeah, well, Israel's also got nuclear weapons, well, it says it doesn't accept that it has, but I think most people agree it has. But none of these countries ever embarked on their own nuclear weapons program in defense against an Israeli nuclear system. So it's Iran that's the threat, and that's understood, I think, it's certainly understood by the United States administration, it's understood by most of the Gulf states, and it's understood, of course, by Israel. So I think that the reality is that there was a nuclear program. It was potentially going to become a nuclear weapon that's capable of being delivered certainly around the region and potentially even further afield, and it had to be put a stop to. As far as the damage done in the 12-day war, I don't think anybody, no one that I read or heard in positions of authority around the US or elsewhere said that the 12-day war had completely destroyed Iran's nuclear.
Donald Trump did.
Maybe he did. I didn't see that.
He said it had been set back decades. He's the president of the United States. He was the one who basically ordered the strike. So the very most powerful and important person imaginable was the one who publicly declared, we have set back Iran's nuclear capability decades. It
Yeah,
turned
and
out we hadn't even set it back. But here's my point, though, Colonel Kemp. We hadn't, it turned out, even set it back 8 months. And in fact, the threat seems to have worsened, according to those who support this war, to the degree there had to be an immediate, massive strike and a war launched. And I find those two positions extremely inconsistent. How can we go from it's been set back decades with this triumphant series of airstrikes last summer, and now suddenly it's so perilous and imminent that we have to launch a massive war right now?
Well, setting it back decades is not the same as destroying it. And the reality is that whatever President Trump may have said, until you actually remove the capability of creating a nuclear program, you can't end it. And that what that means in reality, Iran, you know, even if you do remove all Iran's enriched uranium, that doesn't end their program. The only thing that, in my view, will end an offensive nuclear program by Iran is the removal of this regime. And that, of course, is what most people desire. Most people who are fighting this war anyway desire. It's what Middle Eastern countries desire. It's what Israel desires.
Right, but that has ceased to be one of the aims of the war, because they all know it's not happening. And so they have very quickly moved away from talking about regime change. You don't hear any of them talking about regime change, certainly not on the American side, because President Trump knows from his own intelligence people there is no chance of this happening unless there's a massive commitment of troops on the ground, which is politically impossible for him. So I do think, and maybe bring Benjamin Rad in here. I mean, I
just say, I don't think the regime change was a specified objective of the war. It was a desired outcome.
But it was being talked about on day one again by President Trump.
And I don't say there's no chance of a regime change happening. I don't believe it's going to happen as a direct result of military action. But I do believe that within the Iranian regime now, both within the political echelon and within the IRGC, there is severe fracturing. Now that in turn, and Naftali Bennett said, he can't predict how long it's going to take for the regime.
He said years.
Well, it could take years, but certainly I think this action will help facilitate potential regime change by weakening the regime and causing internal division in the regime.
The trouble is...
So where do we land after this debate? The anti-war speaker makes a powerful evidence-based case against the USA. First, the nuclear justification is shaky at best. Trump's own intelligence chief says Iran has no weapons program. The 12-day war was declared a success, yet 8 months later the USA is back at war. That's not consistency. That's a pattern of deception. Second, this war is a violation of international law. Attacking a country that is not an imminent threat to the USA is a crime. Killing nearly 200 schoolgirls is not a mistake, it's a pattern. The USA has supported the same tactics in Gaza and Lebanon. Third, the real goal is regime change. It always has been. Since 1979, the USA and Israel have wanted to overthrow the Iranian government. The nuclear program is just the excuse. The speaker also reminds us of history. Those with long memories remember the Iraq War. The WMDs that didn't exist. The 45-minute claim that was a complete fabrication. The USA used the same playbook then. It's using it again now. Now, to be fair, Iran is not a democracy. Their human rights record is terrible. But so is Saudi Arabia's. So is Egypt's. The difference is, those countries do what the USA tells them. This war was never about nuclear weapons. It was about control. And that makes it a crime. The anti-war speaker is right. This war should never have started. The USA should end it now. What do you think? Did the USA commit a crime? Comment below. Thanks for watching. Hit like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. See you in the next one.